Thank you very much, Jitendra ji. Thank you very much to all the wonderful participants who keep joining us week after week. I see a lot of familiar names in the list, and many more will join us slowly, but we'll start on time. So I welcome all of you, including our distinguished speaker, to this 35th session of Analytics Wednesday. It's really been a great pleasure, hosting this week after week and really, learning about analytics from different distinguished speakers. Today's session is real life examples of analytics and visualization in internal audit by Jitendra Khatri, Associate Vice President, Internal Audit, Valvoline. Summer Audit Systems, as you know, has been at the forefront of bringing audit technology to professionals in the country, whether it is IDEA, the flagship product, or KSO working papers for CPA, CA firms, Smart Exporter for ETL for SAP, LSA, which is continuous control monitoring, continuous auditing solution, Lex Comply, which is a legal compliance platform on the cloud for organizations, and so on. So there is consulting efforts, there are e-learning modules, there are training modules which are available for people, and so on. This session has been supported by Government of Canada as usual, the Trade Commissioner Service, and February 1st week, all going well, we would be hosting a physical workshop for Chief Internal Auditors at the High Commission premises in New Delhi. So we are looking forward to keeping our fingers crossed with the current COVID situation and hoping that that session will happen so we can personally meet a lot of Chief Internal Auditor, CFO friends in the High Commission in New Delhi. There will be an invite-only program, and we'll be sending out invites shortly in the second week of January, looking at the COVID situation. Let me now introduce our speaker for the day formally. Jitendra Khatri is a seasoned internal audit leader with 18 years of experience in internal audit, data analytics, SOX, risk management, and SAP. He is a rank holder chartered accountant, company secretary, and certified internal auditor. He has worked in diversified industries like HCL Technologies, DCM, Shriram, and JK Tires. He currently leads the global internal team of Valvoline Incorporated for its international business, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and also Asia Pacific, which includes India, China, Australia, and other Asian countries. So I think a lot of international experience under his belt, which he oversees. A lot of experience. So looking forward to his presentation today. Over to you, Jitendra ji.
Sure. Thank you, Deep ji. Let me share my screen. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes. All good.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Deep ji. First of all, for the invitation, and the moment I got this invitation to speak on this topic, I've been thinking about the content of it, whether I should be talking about the strategy part of it, whether I should be talking about the operational aspect of it. I try to cover a bit of everything with my final inputs or thought process which I have, or the principles which I have been following for last 18 years on the data analytics front. And I've tried to be as practical as I can be, wherein I've tried to capture some of the examples also, which are again hypothetical examples covered, but that those were used by me in somewhere in any of the industries also. So that's a brief background about my preparation on this. Let me move forward and start the presentation. The first thing which comes to our mind, and obviously I know that almost all the participants who are part of this discussion as of today are well versed with why data analytics or visualization is required, but still my 2 cents on this topic would be that Uh, Data analytics enable the internal auditor to see the big picture, to have a holistic view, to have a bird eye view, wherein uh, if we restrict ourselves to a sample based testing, then even if we may be purely systematic in selecting the samples, however, we cannot be sure that those samples are the real representation of the population. Even though we do all those, and even the process owners would not get a comfort that the samples which we have taken and the results which we have corroborated out of those samples are the real representative of it or not. So from that perspective, it becomes all the more important that as a part of data analytics, we extract or we take almost all the population, perform the analytics on that, and then come up with those assessment. So therefore, if we restrict our assessment based on a selected sample, then those may or may not be the realistic one. However, when we are picking up a fair amount of population and performing the analytics on those, then our assessment would be more realistic. And the another aspect of when we have a realistic assessment, then only we will be able to provide a practical recommendations. Because many times, if we are not very sure of the issue itself at the hand, probably we will not be able to provide the right recommendations also. Therefore, the data analytics helps internal audit for having a realistic assessment of the issue, and based on that, the practical recommendations which can be provided by the internal auditor. So these are the two specific aspects. Now, the third aspect which I talked about here is the prioritized efforts. And these prioritized efforts are applicable both from the internal audit perspective and from the management perspective also. Let me first talk about the internal audit aspect of it. As a part of our internal audit planning process, before we start a field work, when we perform a data analytics around the planning aspect of it, in the sense like what are the top vendors or top customers or top expense head which are there, so then that based on your data analytics, which are the areas where you should focus more, which are material enough, therefore you need to put more efforts on it. So that prioritization of effort is also helped by the data analytics piece of it. And same goes for the process owners or management also. Suppose you have come up with a issue, and you want the management to take action on it. Again, based on the data analytics, we will be having more realistic assessment, as a result of which we will be able to tell the process owner or management that here are the top 1, 2, 3 action which you should take first, and you should prioritize your efforts, because many times it happens that all those issues cannot be taken care of, or there has to be segregated, there has to be a staggered effort which needs to be put in by the process owners or management. And therefore, having a thorough data analytics on the field would certainly help having a realistic assessment, practical recommendations, and the prioritized efforts. And above all, the all three components enable us to have an insightful audit report. Now, so one piece, which is a bigger piece from insightful report perspective, is data analytics, but there are other aspects of it also, and I'll be talking about that in the subsequent slide. In crux, if I were to summarize this, the data analytics has a power to convert a possibility of a risk into an impact, in the sense like, if we have not performed the data analytics, or we don't have a we don't have a certainty on the issue, then we may have to restrict ourselves in saying that there may be a chance of, or there may be a possibility of duplicate payment. Whereas if we had performed the data analytics, and now we know that based on that we have come across the instances, based on the data analytics we have the instances, so now the same issue or observation moves from a possibility to there has been a duplicate payment also. So that's the power of data analytics, wherein a possibility of risk can be converted into the impact of the issue itself. And then even the perspective of the process owner would also outrightly change the moment we come across and mention that there are issues which has happened, the consequence which has happened. So that's the beauty of the data analytics and visualization piece. Moving on to the next slide, which is about the insightful report. And, I have borrowed it from all across, and these are the crux or summary of having an insightful report, which is 5C, 5I, and 5Is. 5Cs are condition, criteria, cause, consequent, and corrective action. Now, what does that mean? It's very simple that whenever we issue our audit report, the issue needs to clearly specify what is the condition, what have we come across with, what internal audit has noted. So that's the condition part of it. The next one comes the criteria. So the criteria is against what we have evaluated it. So it may be a policy non-compliance, it may be a regulatory non-compliance, or it may be a general prudent aspect of it, or the financial reporting aspect. So what is the criteria against which we are saying that, it may be an accounting standard. So what against what we are looking at the issue. So that's how the criteria is very, very important. The third aspect, the third C, is the cause, and that's where the 5 Whys come into play. 5 Whys, very simple way of finding out a root cause, which is why the particular issue has happened. So it has happened because of X. So why X has happened? So it has happened because of Y. And then why has happened? So it may be because of Z. So the more deeper you go into a problem, you will be able to find out the right root cause of it. And that's where the data analytics again helps us to identify the real root cause of the issue, and not only the issue itself, only issue. The fourth C is the consequence, and that's where the data analytics certainly plays a vital role, wherein what is the impact of that issue that we would be able to calculate or quantify just based on the data analytics piece only. So that's where the importance of data analytics in insightful report is very, very high. And the last one would be the corrective action, because that's how we need to, how can management correct that issue. So these are the 5 Cs. We talked about 5 Is. Now let's talk to 5 Is. There may be duplication between 5 Cs and 5 Is, but again, I kept it this 5I, and that's specifically because of 2 aspects. Issue, we all know that issue has to be there in any audit report or any issue. The 2 aspects, information and insight, I think these are the 2 differentiators. Information, our audit report should be informative. At the same time, the information should not be that which management already know. We need to provide the information which management is already not aware of. And that's where the insight comes into play, that what kind of additional insight are we able to provide, not only on the data, but what the kind of story which we are telling to the management. And that's where our data analytics plays a very, very vital role, because once you have the data analytics, then only you will be able to have an effective visualization, and that's where you will be able to tell the story in a more effective manner to the management, and you would be able to influence management to take actions based on your report. And that's where I would say the real success of any internal auditor is that, are we able to influence the process owner to take actions based on our audit report? We may have a flashy audit report, but in case we think that management is not buying into it and they are not taking actions on it, then somewhere the onus is also on the internal auditors to make their case more prominent or more stronger, and that would be possible by way of data analytics and visualization. And believe me, I have been practicing for last couple of years about the more and more focus I'll be talking about my data analytics journey throughout also. And I'm sure that the data analytics is a powerful tool, so that we can compel management to take actions based on our report. So that's where the top point of insightful report becomes relevant from the data analytics perspective. Now, when I was thinking about it, the data analytics piece, there is an evolution of data analytics, and let me start with that. Each organization or each audit team may be at the different stages, or it may be a combination of the different stages. Even with the same audit function may have to adjust to some different stage at a given point of time, and I'll be talking about that also. So this is based on my overall experience so far, I would say we are into, like, I have seen into this continuous control monitoring and integrated visualization part. I'm yet to see the predictive analytics part of it, but I'll be talking about that in second. Let me first start with the sample based testing. uh, we all know that we should move away from the sample based testing, and we should be having more of the data analytics piece of it and the substantive testing based on the data analytics which has come out of it. But there are limitations wherein if the data is not available at all, then you will have to do a substantive testing of this on the based on the samples only, or the the change logs are not available. The data is into the system, but you are not able to select the right sample of it, and therefore you'll have to rely on the sample-based testing only. So there may be n number of examples, those kind of situations wherein even though you may be at the continuous control monitoring and integrated tool with visualization, but you may have to rely on the sample-based testing also. So it's a process, and depending upon the nature of the assignment, the nature of the project, you may have to rely on the sample-based testing also. The next step would be the Excel-based analytics, and where the Excel-based analytics comes into play, that where there is non-standard data. So if it is a repetitive in nature, then it's better to go for an tool or for the queries, and we'll talk about that. But if it is not, if it is going to be a one-time exercise, so from the effort cost benefit analysis point of view, it makes sense to perform those analytics within the Excel itself. And these may be a non-standard data, or it may be a non-repetitive or ad hoc kind of analysis, so it is better to stick to the Excel based analytics. The next step would be the analytics tool with Excel data upload. So what does it mean? That your analytic tool is there, but that is not connected with your ERP system. So somewhere you are downloading the data and putting into the system and then uploading into it. So that's where there are many tools which are available. Even we had used the idea tool also, wherein we were downloading the data from the system, from the SAP, and were uploading into the idea tool. And similarly, there are other tools available as well. Same goes for the Power Query, Power BI. We have been utilizing it that currently as well. So again, the analytics tool are there, wherein it is not connected with your ERP system, but then you upload that. The only drawback which I see is more from the time consumption point of view. Some even the team loses interest on it. So it's better if we can evaluate and find out a solution wherein the analytics tool which is connected with the ERP. Same goes for like SAP BIW is the classic example in our case. Even the idea provides a connectivity with SAP. So again, that's where that may be again one aspect of it. But that would be the next step within the data analytics journey, or whether your data analytics tool is connected with the ERP system or not. The third part, the next step would be integrated tool with the visualization, wherein it, like in our case, we have been utilizing now SAP Analytics Cloud, which is SAC, which is linked with BIW, and we also have a plan B, wherein, because for this we have to be relying upon the IT team for creating the queries for us. And here what we have done is, we have the SAP BIW reports available to us. We connected those queries into the Power BI, and then we are able to get the visualization. So again, we need not to do all those steps manually. The data is already there. We have set up the query, and we are able to not only have those queries built in, but those are repeatable in nature. We are able to extract the results, and we are again, those are, since those are connected with Power BI, so that we are getting the visualization also. The next step, and by the way, the connected part of it would be the continuous control monitoring, and that's where our team currently is our team has developed the 5 queries with the IT team. And the idea is that those queries, once developed, will be handed over to the management. And it is very simple that there has to be a close collaboration between the teams, between the IT teams, between the process owners and the audit team. And that's where we can develop those continuous control monitoring tools. As I said, we are into like this stage right now. We have not yet reached to predictive analytics part of it. I'm sure there are varied organizations, industries wherein they are heavily utilizing this predictive analytics. And again, the evolution of data analytics of the internal audit department is also dependent upon the level of digitalization by the business itself. If the business processes are not digitalized, then the internal audit alone cannot do the digitalization, or they cannot reach to these kind of stages. So again, there are inherent limitations of the organization also, but at the same time, as an internal auditor, our endeavor should be that how can we move forward towards more of a continuous control monitoring, integrated tools with the visualization. And the last one would be the predictive analytics, wherein we try to evaluate the RPA, but again, from the cost benefit point of view, the cost was coming in high as compared to the efforts which were being reduced by the RPA. So we had to drop that idea. But yeah, certainly that would be an action. But yeah, artificial intelligence and machine learning, I'm sure that in a coming times we would be able to utilize that in our internal world also. Uh, eh, eh, the as I said, we may be at the different stages. At the end of the day, our endeavor as an audit team or as an internal auditor should always be that how can we move inch towards more digitalized data analytics tools. So that's where the real picture comes into play. Moving on to uh, the connected part of it, which is audit report evolution. So when we talked about evolution of data analytics, if we look at from the past versus present, and this is my own experience. In past, we used to have like 20% of our issues were based on the data analytics and 80% were based on the sample-based issues. Now it has just turned. Now currently, our 80% of the issues are based on the data analytics and 20% are based on the sample-based issues. So that's how, again, all this is possible because we had invested heavily on the data analytics. We had a focused effort put into data analytics, and that would be the request. Even the forum which we are in here, if we can put in extra efforts on the data analytics piece, we would be able to reach to that. Moving to the next section of the data analytics, wherein again, I'm sure that almost everybody who are here and listening to this conversation, they are well aware of the steps of the data analytics piece which are there. But again, I have tried to touch upon some of the finer points in this. The first step for data analytics piece would be the hypothesis. The next one would be the data source, then the data cleaning, analyzing, and the interpretation. Now, what do we mean by hypothesis? It is kind of the data analytics objective. What do we want to achieve out of it? And generally, there will be two force which would determine the hypothesis. One would be the audit objectives, another one would be the data analytics library. The data audit objectives generally would be focusing upon operational efficiency part of it, regulatory compliance, or the financial reporting part of it. So what kind of objective which we want to achieve out of that internal audit would certainly decide or determine that, what kind of data analytics queries needs to be developed or put in for the purpose of the audit. The another piece would be the data analytics library, wherein based on your past audit results, based on the fraud list, based on the benchmarking exercise which you have done earlier, ideally you should have your data analytics library available so that for any specific audit area, you should be able to identify that, okay, at least whenever we are going for a procure to pay kind of audit, these are the 5 standard queries or from the library which will have to be put in by the team, and they will have to say that, okay, they'll have to perform those analytics and say that whether it is the risk or issues are there or not there, all those kind of things. So there are two buckets. Again, from organization to organization, it may differ. It may be again more focused on the audit objective piece, less focused on the data analytics library, or even data analytics library may not exist. But again, certainly from the best practice point of view, we should have a data analytics library and audit objectives also. When we developed our 5 queries, those were coming in from our data analytics library, and 5 more are there which we are preparing it for the from the Power BI queries. So we will be having 10 queries which are already readily available from those data analytics library. The next piece is about the data source, and I'm sure it is very basic to considered, but it is certainly not a basic aspect, because first of all, the team who is working on it, they need to know whether the data is actually captured in the system or not. So that's the first question which any audit team needs to ask themselves. The another aspect would be the alternate data sources. Is there any alternate data sources available for the same information? Is there any alternate systems available? Is management ensuring the completeness and accuracy of the input itself, whether the data is whether the data is being relied upon by management or not? If if the data is not being relied upon, if the data is not complete and accurate, and you are performing the data analytics based on that, it would certainly not serve the purpose. It will be the waste of effort. So therefore, before getting into the data analytics piece, these are the some of the basic questions which the person needs to know. And similarly, like where is the master data and transitional data stored? The person needs to have a knowledge of the system and access to the data, and the finally ways to export the bulk data into the Excel part. And if you look at this list, it is not only the IT, it is not only the business, but it is the culmination of IT and business. And that's why the need of purple auditor is there, and that's have been my favorite subject, and I've been talking about that. This purple auditor concept, it's a very simple concept to understand, and you can see it from here, this diagram also. The red piece, which is from the IT, the blue is from the business, and we need a person who understands IT as well as who understands the business. So that's why if you look at the red and blue becomes the purple, and that's why we need a person who is a purple auditor, who understands the system well, who understands the IT well, and who also understands the business. Because if you look at, if the person does not know the relevance of those data, then again it won't serve the purpose of having an effective data analytics. And that's why we need to have a purple auditor in our team who would be able to identify these aspects and would be able to work with the management, and we will be able to add more value to the process owners as well as in the data analytics journey. The next piece would be the data cleaning, and again, it's very basic: format, aggregate, and test. And probably the least importance which have been given throughout, generally, which I've seen, would be the testing part of it. But I think it would be the most important aspect of it. Whenever the data is aggregated or formatted, some before they perform any analytics, that has to be tested, that whether aggregated data with the source data, whether it is making sense or not. And the best way would be the just go for the high variances, where you feel that there are high variances, go and test it with the source data, which would tell you that whether the data, is there any issue in the combining the file or itself or not, or in the cleaning, have you missed out something or not. So those will be the basic test, basic checks which will have to be performed, and which would serve the purpose of having an effective data analytics. The next piece would be the analyzing part of it. And if we look at again, from industry to industry, from expertise to expertise, it may differ, but again, I have kept it very simple and very basic, that these are the four kind of basic rules which are there. One would be the comparison. Just the comparing operational data with the financial data, you will be able to identify where are the issues or inefficiencies exist. Or there may be databases which are being maintained by different functions differently. When you reconcile it, you come to know that, okay, procurement is saying X, supply chain is saying Y, and where are the differences, and both are working on the different data set itself. And just by comparing these two databases, you will be able to find out a lot of issues coming out of it. Same goes from the different systems. Same information is being utilized differently in the different systems. If you reconcile it, you will be able to know that what are the issues which are coming out of it. So again, comparison would be the simplest way of doing things, or simplest way to do the analytics. The next one would be the ratio analysis. And again, just I given some very high level basic examples, but again, as I said, from industry to industry, from the business to business, from the process to process, there may be n number of analytics which can be performed, and those can be compared, those can be questioned, and we will be able to find out. And I'll, as a part of this audit, as a part of this discussion, I have included some of the examples which I'll be talking about that also. But yeah, that's where I would say the ratio analysis would be again that kind of information which can be analyzed and can be utilize from the audit perspective. Trend analysis is again very basic thing, which is YOY, quarter-on-quarter, or month-on-month variations, which we can see, and we can find out a lot of anomalies coming out of it. The summarization piece, I think that's where in my view, most of the auditors do struggle, and that's where the more and more focus needs to be there. If when we calculate, or if we can arrive at a average, if we can calculate and show the management the average, median, top 5, top 10, top 20, weighted average, median, min, max, these summarization tools certainly would be able to help the management in focusing and prioritizing the efforts which is required. Because if we don't provide that kind of summarization, then it will not be serving the purpose. The last step, which is most important step in this, we may come across a lot of, there may be a lot of data analytics which have been performed for any particular audit area or something. But these are the 3 basic tests. If either of it is not matching, then certainly those should not be reported. It has to be material, it has to be logical, and it has to be relevant. If either of 3 is not serving the purpose of any analytics, so it is better to leave that audit, leave that analytics, and don't put it into the report. Now, I'll just add on here. I'll just remind everybody the law of wasted efforts, and it's very simple law which says that. Generally, lion only succeeds 1 out of 4 hunting attempts. So 75% of the times they do not succeed. Same goes from the audit perspective also. It is not necessary that if we have performed the data analytics, ultimately this will result into a reportable. It is not always necessary. It has to pass these 3 basic tests. It has to be material, it has to be logical, and it has to be relevant to the audit field. If it is not that, then we need not to be worried about, and we should accept that during our audit data analytics also, there would be some wasted efforts which will be there. And it means that those efforts may not ultimately result into the audit report, but those were required, and that's why we need not to be bogged down by that, and we need to make sure that we are not putting something in the audit report which is not making sense, which is not material, which is not logical, or which is not relevant. All these 3 aspects are very, very critical for the purpose of it. Moving on, these are some of the examples which I've talked about 3 examples. I'll try to talk about those examples, and then I can open it for the question answer or something. I'll take some time to explain this, and what I've tried to do here is, and again, these are not the real observations of any of my organization which I have worked upon. And again, the terminologies have changed, everything has changed. Just the idea is to provide you guys some ways or some sense of how and where we can utilize data analytics, or what can be the approach for data analytics or visualization piece. So this was a simple example wherein 3 out of 10 sample distributors, the target form was not signed on time. So suppose the validity period was from 1st January to 31st of March. So that was the target period. However, ideally, the whole objective of the target form would be to incentivize the distributor to take action, so that they can sell more, they can do all those kind of things. So that's why you generally sign the target before the validity period starts. However, if you come across a situation wherein the target forms are being signed after the validity period, so that was an issue, that can be an issue which somebody can point out. But now if I look at this, and if I just take this 10 random samples, out of which 3 were not compliant, just based on this, whether I'll be able to influence the management to take action on it? If yes, then what kind of action am I expecting out of them? So those clarity would certainly not be there if I've just restricted myself to the sample piece of it. Now, again, let me divide the whole discussion into 2 parts. One, where the relevant data point is not captured into the system, and second, where all the relevant data is is captured in the system. Like in this example, wherein we'll have to do a sample based testing only, because the data, the signing data, the target form sign date is not there in any system. So somebody will have to go, will have to look at the system, will have to look at the physical form, and will have to find out that whether it was on time or not. So that's why this is an example wherein you can't be 100% or absolutely being relied upon the data analytics piece. However, what steps can we do so that we can initiate, we can compel the management to take action based on what we are saying? And whether, before we even compel the management, the basic question would be, does whether this issue itself is material enough, is it relevant enough to put it into the audit report or not? So to determine that, we need to perform some data analytics around it. And what can that data analytics be? That's where we have, I try to come across and try to find out, or try to elaborate that in the next. So that is one aspect of it. The moment if I put it this, I'm sure, there is a less than 10% of the chance whether it will get a due notice by the management, and even there will be some action triggered out of it. But the moment if I change it, and if I say that, okay, this is not the 10 random samples which I'm talking about, I am looking at the top 10 distributors by revenue, and those top 10 distributors are contributing to the 87% of your total revenue. So that's where I am putting the ball in management's court by saying, or by telling them that I'm not talking about any random 10. I'm talking about top 10 distributors, which is contributing to your 87% of your total revenue. And the 3 distributors which were not compliant were contributing to the 38% of your total revenue. So again, I'm giving them the real number that, okay, this is where your maximum risk lies, and this is the total risk is like 87%, out of which, so my sample was adequate enough, uh, because that's how I took it. And as I said, the data is not captured into the system, so I'll have to rely on the sample only. But the moment I change the system, the change the samples from any random to top 10, then I'm compelling the management to think about it and take action on it. And another aspect which I added on here is about the average delay. If I say that it was not signed on time, that's fine. But if I'm saying that the average delay was 1.5 months, then again it compels the management that they need to think over it, that why can there be so much of delays. But still I feel that this 1 to 2, there are some improvements to it, but again it is not the action, it is not again coming up clearly action oriented. So now the next step would be this. Now let me pause here and take some time to explain that aspect. uh, Now, the moment I put this into my audit report, there would be some action coming out of it. So this is not a substitution of this two. This is not, but if I put this, wherein I say that, okay, this, and here are some of the aspects which I wanted to talk about. Whenever we are utilizing any graph in our audit report, we need to have a clear header that, we should not leave it to the management to just assume that what are we talking about. So we need to have a clear chart title. I know these may sound very basic, and but believe me, I've seen many audit reports wherein these basic aspects are not covered, and therefore the process owner are equally confused that what are we trying to achieve out of it. So that's why the chart title becomes almost important to clearly say that this is the delay status of the target form signing. And I'm not talking about any random 10. I'm talking about 10, top 10, and this is what the revenue share is all about. So here I'm showing my 87%, which I can clearly see, even if the person is not reading or everything, but the moment that person looks at, any reader looks at this chart, they clearly can see that, okay, I'm saying top 10 sample distributors, 87%, 38% are non-compliant, 49% are compliant. So again, there is an issue which is there. But we did not stop there. We said, okay, now what has happened if the target forms are not signed on time? What is the real issue coming out of it? So the real issue is that you are not able to incentivize the distributor to take action on it. So probably there may be instances wherein uh, there is no clear action, the basic purpose of the target forms are not being served. So that's where the concern is. So now the question is, again, as I started, the whole objective of data analytics is to convert a possibility of risk into an impact. Now, it may not always be necessary that you will be able to do that, but again, as an auditor, that's an attempt which we can make, and that's what we had tried to do here. We said, okay, now let's look at the data. Now, just to explain here, this is the revenue line, and these are and we were talking about like this year, suppose FY18 we are talking about, and these are last 3 years data wherein we said that, okay, this was the revenue number which was coming in. This was the quantity line which is there. So the quantity are on this axis, secondary axis, and the primary axis is the revenue. So that's why. But if you look at the target for FY18, the target revenue is so less. Same, it is, the quantity is less. So the basic question is, you are signing a contract which is after the fact, even though you are giving them very lower target and they are overachieving it, and you are paying them the higher rebate. So why so? So the moment we started from this, and if we ended here, the whole equation gets changed. So the impact of this observation gets changed, and that is all possible. And again, there is no rocket science. We have done it here. It's a very basic analytics which we have performed, but the whole idea why I put in this is to show that even if we are doing a basic data analytics right, we'll certainly be able to compel the management to take action on it. And obviously, the overall theme can be that probably your target setting process itself requires a revamp, because if you're not signing it on time, that does not mean it is just an operational issue. It means that there is some basic purpose which is not being met, and you need to relook at it. So that's where that was one of the examples which I thought may be relevant. I know, again, there may be different industries, there may be different aspect of it, but the whole objective of showing this is the power of graphs and having clarity on the title, on the, and if we are talking about, if we are speaking the language which management understands, which would be from the revenue line, that would certainly make an impact, and that would certainly compel the management to take action on it. This is another example wherein, in the earlier example, our data points were not available. Now in this example, all the data points are available. So now, again, at a very high level, in 37% of the cases, the bids were not invited. The bids were invited from a single vendor only. And in 63% of the cases, 2 or more bids were invited. However, ideally there should be 3 bids, which was not there. So like out of where the 2 or more bids were invited, in 26% of the cases, 3 bids were received. In 22% of the cases, only 2 bids were received, and 15% only 1 bid was received. So effectively 15 plus 37, wherein only 1 person was asked the information and those were given the contract. So again, that defeats the purpose. And again, since we had all the data, this data analytics was performed on the total population, we are able to tell that, okay, this is what the real issue is. So are we utilizing the tool effectively or not? That's a question to the management itself. And again, this is at the transactional level analytics, and this is at the master level analytics. And what does that mean? So suppose there are 1699 overall bidders which are registered on your tool. However, you are inviting the quotation only from the 18% of it. So 82%, either those are those are inactive in nature, or you are not putting the right data into it, or there may be favoritism going on. We don't know, but yeah, that's what the data is saying. Now, if I look at, so this is registered versus invited. Now, if I look at invited versus participated, so these were like out of these 18%, which is 307,
60% of the cases which were always invited, and they always participated. So that's one way to look at it. 24% which were invited, but they sometimes participated. There are 14% who never participated. You invited them every time, but they did not participate. And 2% of the cases wherein you invited them more than once, but they never participated. So probably these are the person who does not exist at all. So the whole idea of putting this, and obviously these are the red flags, and again, you'll have to do all those, remove the red flags and all those kind of things, which you may or may not be able to prove. But at the end of it, the whole idea is, are we able to provide that insight to the management? And that is only possible when we have performed, when we are putting adequate efforts on the data analytics piece, when we had gone into the details of it, we put in the right graphs or visualization, and we are compelling the management to think about our observations, because the onus is equally on the internal auditor to make the management realize the issue, the gravitation of the issue itself. Since we are already on the time, I'll just quickly sum it up. This is the last example anyways. Again, I restricted, this is a sunburst, and the idea of putting in this particular chart was that you can also utilize that in your audit reports if you have not been doing it. The whole benefit of this is there are two layers of aspect which you can show it here. If you look at from this perspective, this is the status of the contract and the target form, and obviously this observation was something else. I just changed the nomenclature so that, and the data is not real data. But again, the whole idea is that you can show that by the count, what is the status coming in. And why I put in this, because if you show the management only this aspect of it, so probably you are not doing the justice. Because if you look at by revenue, the mostly things are in green. So in a way, we are being honest to the process owners by saying that if we go by the count, you may find more reds into it. But if you go by the value of it, probably the major or majority of the risks are already covered of it. So that's where this graphs also helps or enables internal auditor to be honest with the process owners, saying, is it material? Is it relevant? Is it, So is it relevant? Is it logical? If either of three fails, then we should not be putting that into the audit report. But here in this case, like the whole idea was to provide them the feeler that if we go by the count, you may not look more compliant, but if you go by the values, so probably your higher value customers, you are putting the adequate efforts, but on the lower, but again, mind you, we are talking about the top 20. Again, we have not taken any random 20. I know that, by taking random 20 also, it has its own benefit of it. But again, getting the management attention helps when we talk about top 20 aspect of it or top 7. So that's my favorite. I might be more biased towards it, but that's how my overall experience has been, that the moment we talk about the real value coming out of it, certainly management will listen to us and they will be compelled to take action on it. And this is the last piece. This is, then we will go to the Q&A for last 15 minutes or so. We are just left with 12 more minutes, so I'll just finish it up. This is my data analytics evolution over a period of time. When I started, and these bubbles can be considered as, so my first job was in JK Tires, then DCM Shriram, then HCL, and now in Valvoline. So that's how over a period of time, overall, I've been utilizing initially at the Excel based. Then I got a lot of exposure about the SAP and worked heavily on the SAP tables, idea, visualization, custom apps versus SAP data. And now we tried RPA, we are doing our Power BI, SAP Analytics, continuous control monitoring, advanced visualization, and the business analytics. And why I'm referring as a business analytics, because you need to have a business understanding well to speak the language of the management. So that's it from my side. Here is my coordinates. In case you have any questions, comments, certainly we'll be having this Q&A after it. But at a later stage also, if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out to me. Here is my email ID, and I'm also available on LinkedIn. So over to you, Deepji and Jairam.
Thank you very much, Jitendra. A wonderful presentation. There are few questions and there are a lot of praise for you. So I think Shiv Kumar from ISRO says that it's a wonderful uh, presentation and a brilliant thing which has been presented. Extraordinary content, simple but contents are extraordinarily great. Which is saying there are two questions. One is from one participant who's asking: has data analytics reduced the duration of the audit? Has it reduced the duration of the audit? That's the first question.
Okay, absolutely. So, and that's where the prioritized effort comes into play, because many times, and that's what have been our strategy also. If based on the data analytics piece at the audit planning stage itself, if we find out that probably this is not a high risk issue or area itself, we may even decide at the audit planning stage itself that, okay, probably, we were thinking when we started, we thought that, let's do a procure to pay process as a complete audit. But when we performed the data analytics, we understood the process at a high level. We found out that there are adequate controls in place, and again the data suggests so based on that we can even decide that, okay, let's not focus on the payment part of it, let's focus on procure to pay, on the procurement part of it. So again, certainly, yes, data analytics, implementing or utilizing the data analytics at the planning phase certainly would have a greater impact on the timeliness of the audit, because then you will be able to put the right energies on the right high risk issues, because again, from the audit perspective, we have got the limited resources available to us, and that's where we need to focus on. So certainly, yes, I have seen reducing the audit efforts based on the data analytics. And again, it is more of a risk based. When you perform the data analytics, that where the higher risk lies on, wherein you want to also put your efforts, and you would want management to take action on it. So bang on, yeah, that is certainly that data analytics certainly helps in reducing the audit cycle as well.
Okay. There's one more question by our dear friend Satish Shenoy. He is saying, first of all, he's saying very effective presentation, and then the question is, just wanted to know your experience of data cleansing. How difficult or easy it has been for you?
Yeah, so I think better I'll move to that slide and then I'll talk about that. Yeah, so Satish ji, thanks for the question, and I would say it's certainly it's a challenging aspect of it, and why it is challenging. One, because you may be getting the data from various sources. So some of the like in our example, I take my from our organization point of view, there are there are ERP. So we have got multiple geographies. Not all everybody, not all entities are on SAP. So there are some entities which are not on SAP. Those are some utilizing their local tools. And again, some may have a facility to export it in Excel, some may not have, some may have different formats. So certainly, that challenge remains. However, there are, from within the Excel also, or even outside, like even I'll just mention idea. When we were having the idea tool, that also helped us, because in one of the entity, it was all PDF based output which was there. They were not able to export in Excel, and we utilized the idea tool to convert those PDF file into the Excel file, and that was done very effectively by idea tool as such. So certainly it has been a journey all over, and again it has been a difficult aspect of it. But I would say the cleansing part is more difficult when you need to think from a repetitive point of view. If it is not a repetitive one, then I'm sure, like within the Excel, we can easily do that data cleansing part of it. But when we need to think from a repeatability point of view, that we would want our tool to change that format every time when the raw sheet is uploaded, that's where the bigger challenge lies in. But otherwise, I think from a from a cleansing point of view, from the data cleansing point of view, certainly Excel itself is a very, very powerful tool. And even as I said, IDEA and other tools are also available, who can help us in putting that. And there are a few basic, complexities involved, like multiple line items. If there are records which are added, or the columns are not in the columnar form, but those are added into the lines itself, those are the again, we need to decide what kind of joins which are required, and again it comes with over a period of time, as the experience go for, but yes, that has been a tough, that is a critical aspect of it, but certainly a very important step. And I would say that, as I mentioned, this test step is a very, very important, crucial step in this data cleansing, that in case we can go back and re-verify it, we will need not to go back at the last stage, and we will be able to find out then and there that what has been the issue so far. So certainly, it has been effective step within the data analytics journey, but it's the most required step also. Satish, I hope I am able to answer what you were looking for.
Yeah, I think what Satish is saying is, thank you, Jitendra, for the response. It was very helpful. Just one last question. I think there's a question on whether data analytics would become a separate practice within internal audit.
Yes, it is, certainly. But again, I would say, and again, I would go here. The answer is yes and no both. Why I'm saying yes or no? Because if we consider that the data analytics is a role of an IT auditor only, and that's why we need to have a separate IT auditor who should help everybody and should do that. I know that it may not be possible to train everybody, but I would say the more and more, I would say, like in our example, almost all the auditors are falling into this purple auditor, wherein they are equally knowing the IT, they are equally knowing the business, and that's why the real person, who would be able to understand it and who would be able to do it. But yes, I've seen organizations wherein there is a one Spock from the data scientist point of view, and those are helping in. But so that practice is also there. But I would say that should be the step number one. You have a dedicated person who is expert in it, but the journey should not stop there. The journey should be that person should be able to train all other auditors so that they become more from a normal auditor to purple auditor. So that would be the real success of having a separate line, separate section within the separate vertical within the internal audit. That person's job should not be only to help them in just getting the queries done, but to train them and to make sure that they are upgrading their own skills. All the auditors are upgrading their skills to become from normal auditor to purple auditor.
Thank you very much. Since there are no other questions, I think Jitendra ji has already shared with us, his contacts, and you can also write into us. So we are very thankful to Jitendra ji for this wonderful presentation, excellent presentation. Specifically, I would like to point out that the 3 examples which are given, they very simple examples, but very powerful, because that showed how information, statistical information can be played around. So as internal auditors, we have to be very careful, and how that information can be made very meaningful for the benefit of the organization. So again, it's a gray cells of the auditors, how to use analytics, and that's very important. That has to come out in every exercise, whether it is analytics or any internal audit exercise which an auditor carries out. So 3 very simple but very powerful examples. This presentation is being recorded, so this will remain on our Sama YouTube channel from tomorrow. So you can refer this to friends, or you can, people can look at it again if they want to go through them. Thank you once again to Jitendra ji and all the participants who joined in. Thanks a lot, and looking forward to all the participants who join again next week, where we'll have the Chief Internal Auditor from Suzlon Energy Limited on analytics in operation, the renewable energy sector. So thank you once again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.